If you want to trust in a translation put together by the Church of England, another brilliant idea, a church based on the family values of King Henry VIII, go for it, knock yourself out. It really doesn't make sense.
Man, you guys just never quit. Okay, I'm in Deuteronomy 22:14, King James only. Deuteronomy 22:14, and give occasions of speech against her, and bring up any evil name upon her, and say, I took this woman when I came to her, I found her not a maid. King James says maid. Guess what it says on Kabbalah.org? I took this woman, and when I came to her, I did not find any evidence of virginity for her. Look at that. You used virginity. It must not be alma, but the word is synonymous with maid, virginity, and maid. Yep. You got holes in your little screen, buddy. You got holes in your garment. You're wrong.
Well, that's very insightful. It's interesting. So, first, thank you very much for your call. And I think you kind of gave it away right at the beginning when you said that you're a King James only guy, which means that you place the King James, a translation that was published in 1611, 47 men in good standing with the Church of England translated the Tanakh, and I use the word translated in quotation marks, the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament into English. They translated it into Jacobean English. That's not as difficult as, that's not as foreign as, let's say, Middle English, which you would probably not understand, but Jacobean English you would. But it has, Jacobean English, the King James, employs many anachronisms, but in that you would place a Christian King James Bible written a dozen years after the Merchant of Venice, you would place that above the Word of God is mind-blowing, really is. And I think just some explanation is necessary here. So, as it turns out, 2 out of the 27 books in the Christian Bible claim that Jesus was supernaturally conceived. You'll find this, what's called an infancy narrative, in 4 chapters out of 89 chapters in the Gospels. 2 chapters in Matthew, 2 of them in Luke. What's striking about Matthew is that Matthew has the I don't even know the right word for it. Matthew actually claims that the book of Isaiah foretold that the Messiah was to be conceived to a virgin, and that was the sign. Whoever wrote the book of Matthew has this so wrong and completely mistranslated, deliberately mistranslated Isaiah 7:14. And there are things he did that he doesn't even realize, because that's what happens when you're messing with text. So Isaiah 7:14 says, Hine ho'alma hora v'yoledes bein. Behold, the young woman is with a child, present tense, definite article. V'karas shemo Emmanuel, and she will call his name Emmanuel. Emmanuel means God is with us. In this case, Emmanuel is conveying to the southern kingdom of Judah. At that time, Israel was in the midst of a civil war, and that God was going to protect the southern kingdom of Judah, not because Ahaz was so righteous or deserved it, but rather because the Davidic dynasty must be preserved. God made a promise to King David going back to 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 12 through 16. So Matthew famously mistranslates the word Alma. Alma means a young woman. King David says, Hiksarta Yemei Alumov, you have cut off the days of my youth. It doesn't mean virginity. King David wasn't a virgin, and King David is also called an Elam, the masculine version, in 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 56. Was he also a virgin? How silly. Is there any Christian translation? Does your cherished King James 1611 translate these words as a maid or a virgin? The answer is, of course not. Because they're playing a game. They're playing the game called hide the ball. They're playing with the word of God. And then they wonder, why Jews don't believe in Jesus, or find it very uncompelling. And the reason is because the whole thing's a scam. The sign, this is what Matthew completely flubs it, and Christians don't get it. The sign is not the conception of the child. There are some Christians who object and say, well, if a regular young woman conceived, and there's nothing supernatural, nothing unusual about how she conceived, or rather she conceived naturally, then there's no sign there, because of course young women can get pregnant. I'm not going to say it's dumb. It's not dumb. These are good people. They just don't know. They mean well. The sign is not the conception or birth of the child. The sign is in verse 15 and 16. Butter and honey will the child eat when he knows to reject bad and choose good. For before he matures, these two kings, namely Pekach ben Ramayahu, who's the northern king of Israel, and Ritzin, who is the king of Syria, not Assyria, but Syria. And that was an alliance, an ill-conceived alliance. Okay. So this is all very silly. The sign is not the conception of the child, the birth of the child. It's the maturity of the child. Now, the proof you are bringing me, you're a Christian, you're bringing me, and it's very insightful to say that I have holes in my, nose? What did he say? Whatever. The Torah, the context it's Deuteronomy chapter 22, the context, the laws concerning sexual relations. This pasuk is dealing with the case of a person who is Moitzi Shemra, who says something about a woman that she's not a virgin. And he discovers that while he's having intercourse with her. V'sam lo alilois devarim, v'hoitzi shemra, and release a negative shemra, a negative name, meaning he slandered her. V'omar, and he said, Esa isha azois lokachti, I took this woman, v'ekrav oleha, and I had sexual intercourse with her, v'loi motsasi lo besulim, and I didn't find any signs of virginity. She was not a virgin. She wasn't intact. I told you this a few times, that this word v'ekrav appears only twice in this exact formulation, only 2 times in Tanakh. Only in Deuteronomy 22:14, the passage you cite, and Isaiah chapter 8, verse 13, because it's talking about sexual intercourse. Va'ekra. So the root is a very common word. Karov means to enter, to come close, like the word carbon, even an offering, same root. Okay, so the word appears hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times throughout Tanakh. Hundreds. But this exact construct with the prefix and suffix and that, only twice in all of Tanakh. And it's conveying sexual intercourse. Isaiah says he had Ekrav El Hanaviyah, and I had sexual intercourse with the prophetess. Why does he go and say he had sexual? Why did he talk that way? Because he knows that in 700 years later, there's going to be a religion, Christianity, that's going to claim that this child was conceived to a virgin. It's mind-blowing what's going on. Now, here's where it gets where your argument really collapses. And I just want to say this to you guys who are King James only guys. I don't even understand why you're doing that. I don't understand why someone would be a King James only person. Like, that means there are people who think that the King James version was kind of divinely inspired, and it's the only legitimate translation of the Bible. I mean, it's the word of man. The King James version has been redone a few times, quite a few times. And why? Because Jacobean English, while it's understandable, you would understand the 1611 King James, which is not the same as the King James today. I'm not talking about the new King James, but it just, the words fell out of use and the meaning of some words have changed. That's just the nature of the game, is that languages change. I mean, biblical Hebrew doesn't change because it's a holy language. It's preserved through Tanakh, through our prayers and so on. But the English language, dramatic. If you're watching, you're listening to me right now, that means you're an English speaker, right? You understand the English language. If I was speaking in 14th century Middle English, you would have no idea what I'm talking about. Maybe you could take a guess at some words here and there. You wouldn't understand it. That's 14th century. 14th century. If you would read Chaucer, you'd have no idea. Really have no idea. But Hebrew is not like this. So the proof that you bring is really very silly. Why? Because the text says, V'omar, and he'll say, I took this woman, v'ekra v'aleh, and I had sexual intercourse for her, v'loi motzasi lo besulim, and I didn't find besulim. That's the word betula. It's the same word. Besulim means signs of virginity. He didn't find that she's a virgin. He discovered that she wasn't a virgin. So that's the whole proof. It's so crazy. This is the whole proof. It doesn't say Alma, it says virgin. The whole point of Deuteronomy 22, verse 14, the whole point of it is that a man is claiming that his new wife was not a virgin as he had assumed. You got it? And it uses the root of the word betula, not Alma. It using this text just demonstrates that Matthew altered the Hebrew Bible in order to make it appear Christological. Could there be a greater testimony to the malevolent intent of the author of the first gospel than the very passage you, a Christian, bring? I just would encourage you. I guess I upset you as a Christian. If I do, I think you should reconsider the way you address people who don't share your beliefs. Because if you talk that way, you're going to turn a lot of people off. But I'm used to it. I'm cursed every day. Christians, every day they attack me, they curse me. So that's just what happens. So it's all silly. Now, you probably still don't understand what the caller is saying. So if you go to the King James, this is very crazy. The end of Deuteronomy 22:14 says, I found her not a maid. Almost every other English translation in 22:14 says, I found her not a virgin. The King James says that the word besulim means maid. I think what you're trying to say is because it's the word maid, as in maiden, and then there are translations that render Isaiah 7:14 as maiden, so therefore it's the same. I don't even think the callers understand the magnitude of this question. I don't think you understand it, but this is the kind of stuff that Christians are often dealing in. Why? Because this guy's a bad fellow? No, they never taught him Hebrew. Never. By the way, if the King James is the word of God, then why do they keep changing it? That means the King James is routinely updated with a few major updates. They just updated it. Why? Because language changes. A great deal of the King James Bible is borrowed from the Tyndale Bible, which was Tyndale Bible is 16th century. It's roughly 100 years older than the King James. Not quite, but it's about 100. So what, Tyndale was also the Word of God? That prophecy, in what universe does this go on? You know what universe this goes on in? It goes on in the universe of Christians who refuse to study Hebrew, an easy language, a very easy language. Biblical Hebrew, less than 9,000 words, less than 9,000 words. You hear that? That's a tiny lexicon. So because in the King James, Deuteronomy 22, verse 14, ends with the word made for the word basulam somehow, and because the Chabad, I didn't look at it, but what are you doing? What are you talking about? So in conventional English, using the term maid or maiden is an anachronism. We don't use that term anymore. The only time we don't say, oh, let me introduce you to my sister-in-law, a fair maiden, because no one talks that way. They did, I don't know, in old books, when I was a kid, maybe, I don't know, the Hardy Boy books, they may have talked that way. No one talks that way, so it fell out of use in that sense. Now, if you mean a maid as in a helper or a cleaning lady, so that word is completely in use in conventional English. So the word maid, look at the fair maiden, people look at you like you're nuts. No one talks that way anymore. The King James is full of these anachronisms, but we can make out what it means. But so what are you talking about? The word there is virgin. The word English translation should cease to use the word maid unless they're talking about a cleaning lady or someone who's, I don't know, someone who's using the vacuum cleaner, who's running your Dyson D11 or V11. So this is all very, very silly. But when you're ready to let go of your cherished, corrupt Christian translations and instead go to the original Hebrew, which all Christians believe Tanakh was written in Hebrew. Like, what did Christians use in the 14th century? Like, what did they use? These divinely inspired translations? Translations are the word of men. Let's go to the word of God. In truth, there are 10 fulfillment citations of the book of Matthew. Every one of them, without exception, has been recklessly rendered, ripped out of context, mistranslated, in order to make it appear Christological. And this is why Christians that I encounter are nice people. They just don't know what has been done to them. And all we're doing here is just setting out the truth. The sign is not the conception of a child. Alma means a young woman. In Proverbs 30, verse 19 and 20, it is a married prostitute or a married sinful woman who is an Alma. Kain der ger Alma. She engages in fornication, takes a bath, and says, I didn't do anything wrong. How could the word Alma mean a virgin? It's so crazy. I don't mean to end it that way, but it's very important to get back to the original. If you're going to rely on Christian translations, you're in trouble. If you think the King James Version is the Word of God, I don't even know what to say to you. I really don't. And which version of the King James? This is a little silly. It's so silly. I mean, in the 17th century, early 17th century, there weren't even Jews in England. Jews were expelled from England. So this is a translation of the Church of England. That's all it is. And if you want to trust in a translation put together by the Church of England, another brilliant idea, a church based on the family values of King Henry VIII, go for it. Knock yourself out. It really doesn't make sense. I would encourage Christians to really reconsider this approach, go back to the original Hebrew and look it up there. Thank you so much for your thoughtful question. If you enjoyed this program, please like and subscribe.
אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נעשה בחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה והוא הווה